video presentation. On the call, we have Mr. Colin McMillan in orange and Mr. Patrick Highsmith in America, our two principal geological directors who are handling all of the work at Neila Creek and Dooloo Creek. My name's Andrew Mortimer, and currently we have an IPO prospectus open at 20 cents, and we're looking to list the company in November of this year and commence drilling immediately at Neila Creek. Boardroom Limited is our share registry, and you can find our link through there. Anyway, I'll kick off first by passing to Mr. Patrick Highsmith, who is former head of Newmont Gold Business Development. He also worked at Fortescue as head of business development and is a geochemist by background, and he's worked in lithium and gold. And he's helped us out greatly over the last few years, especially on Dooloo Creek. And what we'll do is Patrick will speak first about Dooloo Creek in Queensland, and then Colin will speak to Neila Creek in New South Wales. So Patrick, without any further ado, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Good to be here for another update to GGR shareholders, particularly now as we're in the listing process. I'll just recap a little about Dooloo Creek, and those of you who've tuned in before will be aware of this material, but we've consolidated it now into a beautiful independent geologist report, which we were presented with, and of course our prospectus, where you can see more detail on the property. But in essence, Dooloo Creek is an important property in Queensland, and I say important because when Andrew first contacted me about the property, I had just left Fortescue, for instance, and my ears sort of perked up because the property occupies an important strip of geology in a Devonian volcanic belt that is also cross-cut by younger aged intrusive activity, including porphyries and epithermal deposits. So what I liked about it is, first up, the Devonian is an age in geologic time with a lot of important mineral deposits, really across different commodities, base metals and gold. But just to about 130 Ks, I think it is, to our northwest, is the Mount Morgan mine, a historic mine which many of you will know because it was one of the largest single lode mines in Australian mining history, but also very high grade for gold and very respectable grades for copper as well. And that's in the Devonian, and we see a lot of those same rocks down at Dooloo. So that was sort of our targeting concept, and when the property became available and Andrew and the team moved to acquire it, it caught my ears because I like those rocks. And then as you can see in the figures you'll see in the IGR and the prospectus, we show that whole part of the regional geology of that part of Queensland, and we show these crossing structures, these northeast-oriented structures. So imagine a volcanic belt sort of oriented to the northwest, and these important structures that are northeast-oriented, and Dooloo sitting at one of those crossing structures. So we like that from the standpoint of potential plumbing really for the fluids there. So we picked up we had the property in the company, and we began working even while we were a private company with our limited finances. But this was right in the middle of COVID, so it was quite a struggle to put our geological team together because we couldn't travel across state boundaries in some cases. I couldn't come from North America to help out. So we latched on to a great experienced geologist in Queensland already named Chris Galgan. And Chris is, you'll see his name all over our documentation on the project. And we commenced with really reconnaissance at first because Dooloo had been previously explored by North Mining and a long slew of other companies who had identified it as an important prospect. Historical prospects had yielded high-grade gold and copper samples. And yet, the limited work that had been done, geophysics, mapping, sampling, a bit of drilling, had always sort of been teasing the explorers with results. And we found that the area was more extensive than we thought. And we really first started with just boot leather geology. And just in February of this year, Colin and I had our first visit to the property, guided by Chris, who'd been working there for a couple of seasons. and Chris took us into the bush to all the historic prospects, and we saw actually the property is quite accessible by paved roads, and yet to really get in the bush, there's a lot of topography there, and you really have to get after it to get back to some of these prospects, which Chris had done. So in our sort of 200 rock chip samples, we collected several hundred soil samples in several attempts to systematically sample the property. But the property is so bloody large that you'll see in our maps that even the work we've done so far has not covered the entire property. We're talking an area of sort of 3 or 4 kilometers in the northeast southwesterly direction, maybe 4 kilometers in that direction, and about 4 or 5 kilometers in the other direction. So it's a large area over which there are historic prospects and small mines. And our return sampling has just consistently yielded grade. And this is a section you'll see in our documentation. We ourselves collected gold samples up to 55 grams per ton. We had copper into the several percent range on some of these prospects. And so being a geochemist previously and having had looked at a lot of gold and copper deposits in my 33 years in the business, we began looking at this from the perspective of what are these elements telling us? Is this a gold property or is this a copper property, for instance? And I have to say, we see both copper and gold on the property. Probably there are some complex relationships relating to temperature and things like that, where we have sort of higher copper in one area and higher gold in another. But having seen all these prospects, I think gold is the common ingredient, and it's probably what I would call a gold-rich intrusion-related system, where intrusive activity has driven hot fluids into these rocks, and you just don't see prospects with very often with numerous occurrences with 10 to 50 grams gold at surface. And then going along with that, higher than 2, 3, 4% copper in a few areas on the property, with associated silver and lead zinc, a little bit more peripheral to where the gold and copper are focused. So you'll see some of those results in our prospectus and in the independent geologist report. And of course, as I said, our finances were limited as a private company, but we did drill the property in really 2 campaigns. In total, we drilled about almost 2,000 meters of reverse circulation drilling in 8 holes and about 1,100 meters in 3 core holes. Now, again, limited drilling over such a large property. Our hopes there were really to understand the rocks and the context for some of these anomalies. And the best drill results are reported in the documents, but I think they were around 2 meters of just under 4 grams per ton gold at the Silver Plain prospect, and then 3 meters of a bit over 2 grams over on the eastern side of the property near the place called the Eastern Breccia. But significantly to me, over all this drilling over a large area, every hole had anomalous gold and copper in it. So we have the evidence for a large system. In some cases, the alteration zone in one of the core holes, I think we had a maximum thickness of almost 50 meters, about 46 meters of hydrothermally altered rocks, with, again, narrower intervals of potentially economic grade, several grams per ton, as I mentioned. So the properties in a big picture setting, we ask ourselves repeatedly, what type of system is this? And we've done a bit of work more recently, which is reported on in the prospectus and the IGR. We did a bit more work with a group called Global Ore Discovery up in Brisbane, who just took the data and gave us some new perspectives on context or analogs for occurrences like this. And we do see other occurrences in Queensland, to a lesser extent in parts of New South Wales, where you see systems like this. They tend to be classified as intrusion-related systems, where the mineralization is usually hosted in breccias, highly faulted and veined rocks. And we do see a lot of breccias on this property, both gold-rich and copper-rich breccias. And we've also seen a lot of evidence of high sulfide mineralization, often oxidized, of course, at surface now. So we've done a broad sampling across the property, collected a good geologic picture of what's there, conducted some limited geophysics and a couple of drilling campaigns, which have turned up an extensive showing of anomalous copper and gold and some quite respectable grades as well. So I guess that's where I would summarize our work so far, Andrew. We've invested substantially while we were a private company, but clearly it's growing. The property has scale, which is to me the most attractive thing about it, a large property and a large mineral system in evidence there, just the kind of thing that that a major company might like someday. But we've got more work to do to follow up on all our success so far.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, I think that's a very good summary.
Thank
and
you.
I think Mount Morgan, that was found in 1880, was actually is still the single largest a single lode gold mine in Australian mining history. I think approximately 8 million ounces, and it's still the largest single lode gold mine in our history. Found, I think, by William Knox Darcy, and his great nephew is actually a shareholder in our company as well. Yeah, no, it's a very exciting sort of potential target. We have got good gold grades, as you say, but yeah, obviously the work starts now as we look for breadth and width of potential mineralization. That's but it's a big target, and the company is based on looking for big targets, world-class targets. We're not looking for small targets. Our geological team, Patrick and Colin, made it very clear that, you know, if we're going to do this, it's worth doing it for big targets, multi-million ounce potential targets. We can leave, you know, smaller gold endowments to other people. Anyway, look, I'll now hand over to Colin McMillan. I'll just say a couple of words about Colin. Colin actually worked with the team, led the team that drilled, discovered, and named the high-grade Ridgeway part of Cadia Ridgeway, 4.6 million ounces at about 8.5 grams per tonne. I think from memory, in New South Wales, it's about 50 k's up the road from Neila Creek, where we are. And he's principally in charge of the Neila Creek project, although he's been helping us with Dooloo Creek as well. Before that, in another life, he worked on the close down plan for Telfer in Western Australia in 1989, but he got the permission to drill some deeper holes, and Telfer is still producing today, more than 30 years later, off the back of those saddle reefs that Colin and his team found there as well. So the right sort of gold geologist if you want to find multiple millions of ounces of gold. Anyway, as I say, Neila Creek is just south of Cowra in New South Wales, about 10 kilometres south, and Colin's been managing it for us. So Colin, if you could give us a summary of Neila Creek.
Very good. Thank you, Andrew. And look, I'll just reiterate what Patrick said. It's a pleasure to be here to work with a company such as GGR at this critical time of listing and fundraising. And I've been involved in similar stories with other companies, and I see this as being leagues ahead of where I was previously trying to raise on the back of a very good gold deposit, but in Indonesia. So, you know, no comparison.
Sure.
Look, just to go back to Dooloo Creek. Dooloo Creek is quite an advanced project with lots and lots of data. And as Patrick mentioned, we've engaged the help of a very well renowned team of geoscientists in global ore discovery. And they're based in Brisbane and have a lot of first-hand knowledge with similar styles of mineralisation around Dooloo Creek. If we now go to Neila Creek down in New South Wales, Neila Creek is at more or less the opposite end of the data spectrum. So it's a project it's a prospect rather than a project. Even though there have been various exploration companies over decades looking at Neila Creek, it hasn't yet had the attention that we believe it deserves. There are many reasons for that, and I'll go through a few of those, but just to put it into perspective, as Andrew said, Neila Creek is about 50 kilometres as the crow flies to the southwest of Cadia. Now, Cadia is a monster of a gold, copper and molybdenum deposit. I was involved in the very early days of the drill out on Cadia Hill. Initially, Cadia was only going to be a short-term open pit of about 2.5 to 3 million ounces at very, very low grade. But through recognition of what it is that drives such a deposit, and this is a monster of a porphyry deposit, through our understanding and our ongoing exploration as we built the mine and prepared to mine, we discovered that these systems are far more than meets the eye initially. And that's where I took a lot of comfort in knowing what we could get out of a recognised gold copper system if we persevere. And Newcrest as a company were very, very good in backing that belief of perseverance. Now, I think GGR, I believe we're in the same boat. We will go straight into a drill program at Neila Creek. A lot of work's been done previously, as well as several historic mining ventures, if you like. Nothing significant, but enough to show that we already know there is a mineralised system there. There is already showings of relatively high-grade gold in quartz veining, as well as lode style or perhaps vein-related high-grade copper. So these were mined back in the early 1900s through until the Second World War, I guess, but never really amounted to much because of the grade and the timing. In addition to that, we see the same rock, the same apes that host the massive Cadia complex. So these are Ordovician-aged volcanics, volcaniclastics, and intrusive rocks. Now, these are all very important things, and we see them there, although the majority of our 43 square kilometre exploration licence is covered in recent sediments. So very, very difficult to explore under sort of 10 to 15, 20 metres of sand, gravel, soil, plus all the things that come with being in a very well-established farming community. So crops, there are crops underway right now. Canola's about ready to be harvested. Grain crops will come off. That will open us up the opportunity, the window to get in and do the drilling that we propose to do. So we've got the right rocks where neurology tells us that we're in the right part of the Lachlan Fold Belt. Now, the Lachlan Fold Belt is a massive system, if you like, that hosts in 3 distinct belts or envelopes, a majority of New South Wales copper and gold related porphyry system style or intrusive related mineralised systems. Now, all of those things stack up and look really, really good. On top of that, we're in a very lucky position in that we have at our disposal a desktop study, if you like, but it is what we call a neural network or a machine learning study done by a couple of very eminent people, being geologists, geophysicists, and computer engineers. Now, this was done many years ago, but what it did was looked at every single exploration and mining opportunity that occurs within the Lachlan Fold Belt, and it ranked all of those based on whether they've been a production in the past or are indeed a producing mine now, or even just a known surface expression of gold or copper or both. So all of this data is available, but no one has had the capability, I guess, or the computing prowess to pull it all together and to rank it. And that's what these guys did. They put together a contour, if you like, of the entire Lachlan Fold Belt which ranked 1 to 62 or 3, the number of computer generated, or I guess that's the best way to look at it, computer generated targets. And some of them were the obvious ones. Massive mines, obviously they're known and they're working and they're good indicators. Obviously there's metal there. But what it did show, that number 6 out of 60 something pointed directly to Neila Creek. So that's great, because it tells us that, okay, we know there's historic data, but in addition to that, there's a lot of surface geochem data, there's a lot of airborne geophysical data. And when you take all of that into account, put it into this predictive model that the neural networking system is, it spits out where it believes the better targets are. And we rank now with Neila Creek as number 6. So on the back of all of that, I've designed a program of diamond drilling. We're not going to fluff around and get out there and sample along fence lines and look for, veining or alteration. We know it's there. We know it's a mineralized system. So we're going to go straight in with a diamond drill rig, and we are going to target across a more or less projected cross section through this neural network target. So this number 6 bullseye target, I refer to it as a bullseye because it is a screaming bullseye target. We're going to drill an initial 3 holes. 2 of those holes will aim directly at and below the known historic gold and copper. So we've got a gold system called the Various mine, or it's really just a little pit on the western side. And on the eastern side, we've got a thing called the Pope of Rome. Now that was a very well-defined 300 or 400 meters strike of copper, secondary copper with some primary copper, and it was actually an underground mine. And they produced a considerable amount of copper ore back in the day. So for that to have even stood up back then as a mine is a really good indication. So we've got a hole on one side to the west, about 1.1 kilometres away, directly on a cross section line. To the east, we've got another structure, and right in the middle of that, we've got this bullseye target that's been generated by the neural network modelling.
Do we know how many tons, sorry, just quickly, Colin, do we know how many tons roughly of ore they got out of the Pope of Rome copper mine and the underground?
Look, the figures that I can find only record around the 10 to 15 tonne of hand-picked copper ore from Pope of Rome.
High grade sort of stuff. Yeah.
Oh, very high grade. It would have been up into the 5, 6, 7, 8%. Malachite, azurite.
Yeah.
And they don't report gold with it, but you can bet. And Patrick and I have been out there on the ground and looked at the scattered remnants of ore or gang material that didn't make it into the horse-drawn cart to be taken away to the blast furnace.
Yes.
And it's definitely a beautiful breccia vein system as well. So the other side of the cross section, the Various mine, as recently as the mid-90s, a company was out there, Climax were out there not detecting, but prospecting, I guess, as part of their exploration program, and took some samples from the old historic workings, and quartz veins went up to 2.5 grams per tonne gold. So it tells us that there's a well-defined mineralized system there. But what we interpret each of these to be are tiny little surface expressions developed as leakage veins that have come off something much deeper. And by much deeper, I would guess in the 2 to 300, 400 meters below surface would be the system, the heat engine, if you like, that has driven the fluids that have found their way via small fractures, faults, cracks through these tightly folded sedimentary rocks, which are indicative again of being in the right type of host rock. And they found their way up these cracks, and they've come to the surface, and they've been exploited as small scale mineralized systems. Now, this is exactly what Cadia started out as. So if you look now at Cadia, well over 50, 60 million ounces of gold, and I don't know how many tons of copper they're up to, with a 40+ year mine life still to go.
Yeah.
An incredible system that sat for a long time right under people's noses until in the 1860s and 70s, they started mining these small scale, high grade copper deposits. Now, that's exactly what the Pope of Rome was. So I believe that, what we're looking for isn't Acadia, isn't a massive low grade porphyry, but it's more likely to be a Ridgeway style. And a Ridgeway style is something that's driven up through these host rocks, sedimentary rocks, as if you can imagine a bubble in a honey jar coming up through a jar of honey, that's how Ridgeway punched its way up. And in that relatively small, confined volume, a lot of metal is trapped and contained. So that's what I think we're after. And the bullseye part of this whole exploration model pinpoints that and says, this is where we believe you should be looking. And I've walked around the paddocks and the tracks there, and there are some very, very enticing, intrusive rocks that have made it up to the surface. Now, these may be common, aged intrusives, but non-mineralized ones. So they're not the ones that have driven the gold and copper that we see in these historic workings. So look, I think as soon as we can, and once we're able to get into the area, the drilling will tell. And we plan to drill an initial 3 holes, each hole to around about 400 meters depth. And in doing that, we will get enough information then to be able to vector ourselves to where we believe, east, west, north, south, up, down, to where we believe the target drilling should focus. So that's Neila Creek. Very exciting, very early days, a prospect more than a project, but we'll very quickly turn it into a project with our own drill results.
Fantastic. Look, thanks a lot for that, Colin. I think that's a very good summary of Neila Creek and a very good description, like Patrick's coverage of Dooloo Creek. Right, do we have any questions from anyone? We can hear you, Andrew. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's Dom here, Andrew.
Dominic, how's things?
Yeah, very good. Thanks. Yeah, sorry about
Brilliant.
that. I was out in the paddock when I.
No, that's all right. That's all right.
Is any on the register? Is there going to be any sort of large institutional investors, or is it sort of made up mainly of the small, sophisticated?
Yeah, so we already have 3 funds on the share register who came on as seed investors. They've got about $500,000 of stock. Just to let you know, Dom, and anyone else who's joined, we are recording this as well. So there'll be a copy later. But yeah, look, there is interest. All corporate comments, questions should be directed to Michael Ivkovic, who's the executive chairman. But Patrick's at the moment sort of making inquiries, and he'll get back to us late this week or early next week on that. But we do expect interest because of the nature of the properties. We've got great projects and great people. And as I was saying before you joined, unfortunately, other companies, they have very good prospects sometimes and good people, but they don't have great prospects and great people. And luckily, we have both.
Yeah, Dom, I'll just add a little bit to that. I run a couple of junior companies over in North America now, and It is a tough market in North America. However, as Andrew said, we had a couple of institutional investors come in while we were private, and of course they're keen to see us get listed. And I've sat with a few additional ones as well, discussing the upcoming listing. And I can say that those with a technical bent who understand the metallurgy of these belts, that's one of the things that attracted one of the institutional investors. Was the fact that we're exploring these Devonian rocks in Queensland. So that was kind of neat to have a synergy there, that they're looking at these metallogenic belts the same way we do. And similarly, when Colin came on board and they got wind that we were exploring in the Lachlan, that again is a good target for major companies down the track. So we have had pretty good attention, even in this sort of very risk averse kind of wait and see market. Had a lot of good meetings, and I think the prospects are good. We'll bring on a couple of more institutions.
No, sounds good. And thanks for that presentation, Colin. What's the timing like in terms of being able to get out there and drill? And you're going straight to diamond drilling, not the RC drilling?
Yeah, look, in terms of the timing, I would like to think that we'll be on the ground before or just after Christmas. It does depend quite a bit on accessibility, so accessing landholders' property. We don't want to upset people, so we'll go about things in a subtle but swift way as we can. And yes, there has been RC drilling done across the Pope of Rome, but